The entire text is in one complete update. I wish that all those who like this post will lose 10 pounds effortlessly. For those who comment, may your wishes come true. Lulu here to remind you. The main story begins now. Everyone says that Wen Xiao loves me to his very core. Before he met me, he was aloof and distant. He had no interest in women. But after he met me, he turned into a doting husband fanatic. Inside Wen Xiao's wallet, there's a photo. His friends say it's proof of how much he loves me. But I don't recall ever taking such a photo. Till our engagement party, I received an old photo taken 11 years ago. It was of his white moonlight, a woman who passed away years ago. The engagement party was in full swing. Wen Xiao was on stage, speaking deeply about his love for me. I stood amidst a sea of flowers. Listening to his voice, almost choked with emotion, I blinked continuously, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to spill. I'm endlessly grateful for the love and companionship he's given me over the years. He's been like a ray of light, guiding me forward. There were professional photographers at the event, but I wanted to capture the Wen Xiao I was seeing with my own eyes. So I lifted my phone, turned on the camera, and hit record. Suddenly, a text message popped up on my screen. Do you really think Wen Xiao loves you? Then came another text, this time showing as an image. I didn't have a chance to open it. The host had already called my name to come on stage. I tore my gaze from the phone, seeing everyone watching me with eyes full of anticipation, though my heart was filled with unease. At that very moment, the camera had already projected my face onto the big screen. I had no choice but to put down my phone and step onto the stage. Wen Xiao quickly walked over, reaching out to steady me, helping me hold up my dress to avoid tripping on the stairs. I went through the engagement ceremony as if on autopilot, my palms damp with sweat. Wen Xiao whispered softly in my ear, reassuring me not to be nervous. I must not have smiled brightly enough, because the host teased that I was simply too excited. But my mind was entirely ensnared by that message. A tangled mess. Wen Xiao doesn't love me? What a ridiculous thought. Unfortunately, I hadn't had the chance to see what was in the picture. Wen Xiao and I met for the first time 5 years ago, by the seaside. I had been mesmerized by the beautiful sunset reflecting off the water. And before I knew it, the waves were lapping at my calves. Wen Xiao thought I was about to drown myself, and he grabbed me suddenly, sending us both tumbling into the sea. After we cleared up the misunderstanding, he treated me to a meal, saying it was his way of apologizing for his brash actions. We exchanged WeChat contacts, and soon we began chatting. I learned he was traveling alone, so I invited him to go with me to various scenic spots. To me, it was just a beautiful chance encounter. Apart from our names, we shared little other information. I never expected that. After returning to biking, at the airport I'd be robbed, losing both my phone and wallet. An enjoyable trip ended in such unfortunate circumstances. I felt absolutely terrible. I was crouching alone at the airport crying when I ran into Wen Xiao again. That was when the wheels of fate began to turn. From his friends, I learned that Wen Xiao was known as cold and unfeeling, not one to be interested in women. Growing up, he received countless confessions, but he rejected every single one without mercy. Yet somehow, Wen Xiao fell for me. After meeting me, he seemed to be struck by love brain, transforming completely into a husband-obsessed romantic. For today's engagement ceremony, he personally coordinated with the designer, arranging every detail according to my preferences. On top of that, the entire event was extravagant and high-profile. As the engagement party for the heir of Biking Tech Group, the room was filled with big names, along with media from every corner. We rehearsed more than once. Wen Xiao wouldn't tolerate a single flaw. He told me, "UA, every precious moment of ours. I won't allow it to be anything less than perfect." Who could ever believe that Wen Xiao doesn't love me? I certainly didn't. With this thought in mind, I suppressed my doubts and replaced them with a polite smile. Together, Wen Xiao and I toasted our guests. After all, this wasn't the wedding itself, so we didn't need to go from table to table. Everyone simply raised their glasses in celebration. But Wen Qiao's friends weren't going to let us off that easily. A Yue doesn't hold her liquor well, he said, so I'll drink on her behalf. Wen Xiao took the glass from my hand and downed it in one gulp. Oh wow! Wen Xiao still dotes on his fiancée like always. Huh? One glass isn't enough. It should be 3. They seized the chance to tease him. No one willing to let him off easily. A group of them gathered around Wen Xiao, and the atmosphere was lively and joyous. I was gently pushed out of the circle, standing on the sidelines, smiling as I watched their antics. Did you see the message? A woman's voice suddenly sounded behind me, startling me. I turned around, and it was Ziweiwei. She held a glass of champagne, her gaze not directed at me, but rather at the group. Or more precisely, she was looking at Wen Xiao. Su Yue, she said, you're really pitiful. She added this with a cryptic look, then gave me one last meaningful glance, and walked away. Ziweiwei was Wen Qiao's college classmate in America, 2 years his junior. Now she worked in PR at Biking Tech. We hadn't met often, but I could sense her hostility toward me. She liked Wen Xiao, that much I was certain. But Wen Xiao didn't feel the same for her. I was certain of that too. I stood there motionless, wondering what she had meant. Was she the one who sent the message, making an excuse? I told Wen Xiao I needed to rest backstage for a bit. Once I had my phone in hand, I didn't check the messages right away. It wasn't until I was out of everyone's view that I read the first text, which only had that single, unsettling line. The second text was an image. When the photo finally loaded, my first reaction was utter shock. Then a chill crept down my spine. A wave of coldness surged through my heart. Just then, my phone buzzed with another message. Log into this QQ account. It read, and you'll see what you're looking for. Below that were 2 strings of numbers. In the second line, I recognized part of it. It was Wen Qiao's birthday. Not many people still use QQ nowadays, and I had no idea what this could contain. But I couldn't log into this account right here. If I tried logging in on a new device, it would definitely require a verification code. If this account really belonged to Wen Xiao, I'd have to wait until I got home to access it on his computer. I sat alone in the lounge, forcing myself to stay calm. Had Wen Xiao betrayed me? Who was the girl in that photo? And why did she look so much like me? Or rather, like me when I was a teenager? Stay calm. I tried to convince myself. My dad and close friends were outside, along with Wen's family business partners. In an atmosphere like this, I couldn't just cause a scene over some suspicious photo and text messages. I retouched my makeup, hoping to look a little more composed. I tried to stretch my lips into a smile in the mirror, but it looked worse than if I were crying. So I gave up on smiling altogether. Straightening up, I paced out of the room. The hotel corridor was carpeted with the finest rugs, soft underfoot absorbing every sound. I had only walked a few steps when I suddenly heard voices from the end of the hall. The voices were painfully familiar. Are you really planning to marry her and spend the rest of your life like this? You don't even love her. Ziweiwei's voice was deliberately low, but I could still hear the frustration in her tone. Then came another voice. She's gone. All I have left is a Yue. It was Wen Xiao speaking. Who was gone? I wondered what would happen if I confronted them now. Would Wen Xiao deny everything? Would I only end up tipping them off? If those messages were indeed from Ziweiwei, then there had to be some truth in them. With that in mind, I turned around and walked away quietly. The engagement banquet was exhausting. Even though many aspects were handled by professionals, Dealing with guests was a mentally and physically draining task. Later that night, after Wen Xiao and I returned home, we washed up and went to bed. He wanted to be close, but I excused myself, saying I felt unwell from the drinks. Hearing this, he immediately grew worried, insisting on taking me to the hospital. When it came to my health, he was always cautious. Just 3 months into our relationship, I'd fallen sick with a stomach issue from irregular eating and was bedridden in my dorm, unable to move. At the time, Wen Xiao had a drinking engagement to attend, but upon hearing I was ill, he rushed to my school without hesitation. He persuaded the dorm matron to let him in, eventually convincing my roommate to sneak him into the dorm. Only later did I learn that because he skipped out on that event that night, he had caused quite a stir. In later business deals, he even sacrificed a 5% profit margin for the other party, which amounted to millions. Since then, he's made sure I eat 3 meals a day on time, and he strictly limits my intake of things like hot pot, sweets, and cold drinks. If I feel even a little unwell, his worrying becomes overwhelming. I've sometimes wondered if he weren't so busy, he might actually take up studying medicine himself. When Qiao's friends say he treats me like a fragile porcelain doll. Our engagement was set for Sunday, August 20th, the 5th day of the 7th lunar month. Since every year on Qixi Festival, we go back to the seaside where we first met. We planned the engagement for 2 days before Qixi. On Monday, when Xiao had to go to the company to handle some affairs, freeing up time for our upcoming vacation. I hadn't started school yet, so I stayed home. When Qiao's study was always open to me, everything in it accessible without restriction, even company documents were left openly around me. Of course, I didn't understand any of it. The divide between the arts and sciences is quite vast. I logged into that QQ account on Wen Qiao's computer with ease. No verification was required, indicating he'd logged in recently. The username was simply Wen Xiao, with a profile picture of the sea. There was only one contact, Yinan. I scrolled through the chat history, finding only messages from Wen Xiao. The other person hadn't responded even once. The most recent message was from yesterday. I got engaged today. If it were you, it would have been just as beautiful. I clicked into the other person's profile. Their last update was in 2012, and there had been no activity since. I spent 3 hours combing through both Yinan's and Wen Qiao's QQ accounts. There was a lot to go through, but it all boiled down to something simple. Wen Xiao had a natural talent for computers. In his teenage years, he considered himself invincible, until at 16, he met Meng Yinan. He lost to her in a competition by 1 point. She scored a perfect score. She was a computer prodigy. The two of them reconnected while studying in the US. During the summer of his 18th year, on Qixi Festival, Wen Xiao was planning to confess his feelings. But that day, Meng Yinan lost her life saving a drowning child at the very beach where Wen Xiao and I would later meet. Every Qixi since, Wen Xiao has returned to that place, and it was 6 years ago that he met me there. At 19, I looked strikingly similar to Meng Yinan, almost a perfect likeness. Later, I became his girlfriend. Disappointment, heartache, anger. A flood of emotions surged within me. 5 entire years, I'd been nothing but a substitute, valued only for my face. What kind of cliché white moonlight story was this? Thinking back on it carefully, it hadn't been entirely without signs. But I'd been too engrossed in the web of adoration Wen Xiao had woven around me to notice. Every Qixi vacation was at that very beach, and he always took an hour to slip away by himself. Every year in late August, he always goes on a business trip. If I calculated, Meng Yinan's death was on August 23rd. He's never in biking around that date. Tomorrow is Qixi Festival, and the day after that is August 23rd. A few days ago, Wen Xiao told me that tonight we would fly to the seaside to enjoy our vacation tomorrow. But that night, he'd have to fly to Nanchang, as he had a business meeting the next day. He asked me to wait for him at the beach. He'd come back the same day he finished the meeting. A true master of time management, planning his schedule down to the minute. At first, I felt sorry for him, thinking it must be exhausting, and I was touched by how much he valued our Kixi tradition. I took out my phone and sent Wen Xiao a message. Darling, how about we stay home tomorrow and go on vacation after you finish your meeting? Ayue. Why the sudden change of heart? Did something happen? I feel a bit of a headache, so I'd rather stay home. Then I'll come back right now to take you to the hospital and change the flight to tomorrow. Wen Xiao once told me that our yearly return to that beach was his way of honoring fate, a ritual to celebrate the bond life had granted us. Then let me accompany you to Nanchang the day after tomorrow, alright? Ayue, rest well. Flying to Nanchang is too tiring for you. I can't bear it. He didn't want to miss celebrating Kixi with Meng Yinan, nor could he ignore her death anniversary. Then what am I to him? I reached for Wen Qiao's wallet. And there it was again, that same photograph. Everyone said the girl in the photo was me. But I truly had no memory of ever being in that scene. The girl in that photo, rather than resembling me, looked more like Meng Yinan. Even now, Wen Qiao was still hiding things from me. I thought he could make sacrifices for me. But he hadn't. Wen Qiao was insistent on going to the seaside tomorrow, and on heading to Nanchang the day after. He turned our engagement yesterday into a complete joke. Our wedding home was still being renovated. So we currently lived in one of Wen Qiao's apartments, conveniently near my school. It took me an hour to pack up all of my belongings, and I called a moving company to take everything to my own apartment. Though I don't have the wealth of the Wen family that owns biking tech, my family is fairly well off. For the sake of appearances, my dad bought me a small apartment once my things were moved out. I stayed behind, waiting for Wen Xiao to come home. I wanted to settle this face-to-face. At midnight, Wen Xiao returned home, carrying takeout from Wadong residents. I loved their food, though they don't offer delivery, only dine-in or pickup. I was sitting on the couch, lost in thought. Maybe my pale and lifeless expression startled him. Wen Xiao sat down beside me, gently wrapping an arm around my shoulders. His face looked concerned, and his tone was filled with worrying. Ayue, what's wrong? Are you feeling unwell? My heart felt stifled. How could he manage this? Tomorrow and the day after would be dedicated to his memories of Meng Yinan. What was this meticulous concern he was showing me now supposed to mean? Wen Qiao, let's break up. Now that everything was clear, I had no energy left to argue with him. Dragging it out would only make things messier. When it's time to end it swiftly. Wen Qiao was clearly shocked. He froze for a moment, and it took him a long while to fully register what I'd said. He knelt in front of the couch, gripping my hand tightly, his face full of confusion, a hint of panic in his voice. Ayue, what's going on? What happened? We just got engaged yesterday. Wen Qiao, I know everything. Meng Yinan. Wen Xiao was my first love. From when I was 19 until now at 24. 5 whole years. Before meeting him, I was a bit of a carefree girl. The kind of girl who laughs easily and loudly, never even considering romance. He was 5 years older than me, in both love and life. He was the one who took care of me when I was confused about my future, when I struggled with my studies, when I was troubled by relationships. He was there by my side, comforting me, guiding me. Wen Xiao was my lover, my friend, my mentor. In the quiet hours of the night, I would sometimes wonder, what does someone as remarkable as him see in me? Turns out it was only this face. How terribly ironic. Outside, the sky had grown dim, and we hadn't turned on the lights in the living room. but I could still see his face clearly. At the mention of allinone, his body stiffened, and he gripped my hand even tighter. A flash of shock crossed his face, his eyes filled with disbelief. Then his expression shifted, tinged with confusion. "Ayue, who told you this? Was it Ziwei? Don't listen to her nonsense." I suddenly felt as if I didn't know him at all. He was quick to blame Ziwei, trying to distance himself from the situation. He'd always been responsible. Someone who took accountability. Someone brave enough to own his actions. This was the first time I realized he had this side to him. Ignoring Wen Qiao's explanations, I walked out. My own apartment had been empty for a while, and I hadn't hired a cleaning service yet, so I decided to return to campus instead. As soon as I walked through the school gates, I ran into my advisor, Professor Keshan. "Professor Ke, I'd like to apply for a PhD program in the UK. Professor Ke was visibly surprised, especially since she had encouraged me more than once to study abroad, and I'd always turn her down, given that Wen Qiao was set to take full control of the company in the coming years. And with the business going through a transformation, I'd wanted to be there by his side, although I couldn't assist him in his work. I thought I could at least support him on the home front. I couldn't let him shoulder everything alone. My dear, are you and Wen Qiao having relationship issues?" Professor Ke hit the nail on the head. Now it was my turn to be surprised. She sighed, then smiled softly. "I've watched you grow over these years, seeing your academic achievements. But Wen Qiao has taken such meticulous care of you, as if he's afraid that one wrong step would cause you harm. My dear, a porcelain doll can't live on its own." When I first met Professor Keshan 6 years ago, I was still in high school. It was her guidance that inspired me to choose English literature as my major. Eventually, I became her student. We were both teacher and friend, and she treated me like a younger sister, showing both warmth and strict discipline. After holding in my emotions all day, I finally broke down in front of her, crying uncontrollably. "Professor Ke, Wen Qiao, he doesn't really love me. He only sees me as a stand-in. All his kindness towards me is just because I look exactly like his first love. His first love died. How could I ever compete with someone who's no longer here?" She held me gently, whispering words of comfort. "It's all right, my dear. You are Suyue, the one and only Suyue. Yes, I am Suyue. So what if this face resembles someone else? I've always just been myself." Early the next morning, when Wen Qiao, I was at my own place working on my application materials. He looked vastly different from his usual polished self. Now he seemed slightly disheveled and weary. Dark circles framed his eyes, his stubble unshaven, and a corner of his shirt was creased. He stood in the doorway, speaking softly. "Ayue, I'm sorry." His voice was shaky, with a hint of pleading. It was weak, but he still wanted to explain. "At first, I did approach you because you looked so much like allinone. But, Ayue, you and you're not the same." In that first year or so, I often asked myself, what was my real intention in being with you? But eventually, I truly understood. Ayue, you are Suyue, and nothing else. Wen Qiao's voice broke as he spoke. He rarely cried in front of me, except when his grandmother passed away. This was the first time. He spoke slowly, and I heard every word clearly. Wen Qiao tried to hold me, but I pulled away. "Wen Qiao, this is hard for me to accept." I lifted my head, hoping to hold back my tears. "I know, Ayue. I'm sorry." He moved closer, ignoring my attempts to push him away, and embraced me tightly. His head rested on my shoulder, and I felt his tears fall onto my skin, scalding hot. "Ayue, don't, please don't." It was hoarse. "Ayue, I love you." Please don't leave me. Wen Qiao, do you really love Su Yue? Since that day, Wen Qiao has ordered a bouquet to be sent to my place every morning. Each time, I refuse to accept it. Every night, he comes to my door, standing there for 2 hours. If he wants to play the role of a door guardian, so be it. After all, I'm inside, and he's no longer a part of my life. To say I felt nothing at all would be a lie. Before all this, I loved Wen Qiao deeply, and I believed wholeheartedly that he loved me, too. 5 years of love, to just let it go. Isn't that easier said than done? Then a sudden message from him popped up. IUA. These past few days, the temperature in biking has been high, but your period is coming soon. Don't indulge in too many cold treats. Make sure to keep warm. I was sitting on the couch eating ice cream. Wen Qiao always remembers my needs better than I do. He's just that meticulous. Since being with him, I haven't had to buy even basic necessities myself. He always made sure I had backups ready, frequently asking about how I felt using each product, even adjusting them seasonally. Once I had an unexpected allergic reaction to a familiar brand of pads, and he spent half the night researching, reading up on the ingredients, checking reviews. Then he bought me a new brand. I put down my phone, taking a big bite of my ice cream. I couldn't deny it. All these years, his care for me was genuine. That kindness was real, and I felt it deeply. But precisely because of that, knowing the truth now makes it hurt even more. It was like a blunt blow, shattering my dream abruptly, like a dull knife, slowly cutting a piece of my heart away. After 5 days, I'd finally organized my application materials. In our group chat, Zhou Young suggested we all go out together. Wen Qiao's friends had always treated me well. After dating for 3 months, he'd introduced me to them, making our relationship official. It was only then I suddenly realized I hadn't told them we'd broken up yet. We've broken up. Just treat that engagement party as a nice dinner together. After I posted this in the group chat, I also shared the news on my social media. How Wen Qiao explains this to his family, that's none of my concern. For a full 5 minutes, there wasn't a single response in the group. They were probably too shocked to process it. Then my father called. He scolded me harshly right from the start, and I struggled to keep my emotions steady. As I explained the whole situation to him, Su Yue, don't so stubborn. Why can't you let go of something that happened years ago? You just got engaged, and now you're talking about breaking up? You're embarrassing the Wen family. And what about our family's reputation? Apologize properly to Wen Qiao, and let this be the end of it. He didn't even give me a chance to reply. Before hanging up the call, my father does care for me, but only on the condition that I'm an obedient daughter. His authority is not to be questioned. It's suffocating. In moments like these, he doesn't care at all about how I'm feeling, only about saving face for the Su family. But I have no intention of compromising. I didn't do anything wrong, so why should I have to apologize? Let them think what they want. After hanging up, I noticed new messages in the group chat. Zhou Young had sent a single question mark. Wen Qiao told everyone it was just a little fight, and that we hadn't actually broken up. Everyone else seemed to be breathing a sigh of relief, none of them believing that our relationship had truly ended. Only Zhang Yao sent me a private message, asking what was going on. Zhang Yao was one of Wen Qiao's classmates, and unlike Zi Weiwei, she had known him since high school. She was an old friend of Wen Qiao's. I told her directly about Meng Yinan. After a while, she replied, I actually saw this coming a long time ago. Zhang Yao then called me, and we chatted for a bit. She mentioned that after she first met me, she had asked Wen Qiao if he could tell the difference between Meng Yinan and Su Yue. At that time, when Xiao had told her he didn't know. Over the years, she had watched our relationship flourish, thinking when Xiao had moved on. But when she discovered last year that we went to hiking for Kixi every year, she began to suspect that things might not be as perfect as they seemed. Zhang Yao worked as a legal consultant at Wen Qiao's company, so she had some insight into his business dealings. Naturally, she found out that every August 23rd, Wen Qiao was never in biking and had no business to attend to. She apologized to me, saying she had kept this from me all along. I didn't blame her though. After all, Wen Qiao was closer to her than to me. I deleted Wen Qiao's WeChat account and left the group chat. Those were all his friends, his circle. I didn't want to have any more contact with them. After school started, Wen Qiao came to see me once. He was still apologizing, asking for my forgiveness, saying he loved me, and similar things. If I hadn't seen the message he sent to Meng Yinan on the day of our engagement, I might have believed him. After all, it's well known that a man's devotion is often just a joke. But Wen Qiao, he really was the kind of man who could be devoted. I started to wonder if he was just brainwashing himself, convinced that as long as I looked like her, I was the one he loved. After that, up until just before Christmas, Wen Qiao hadn't come by again. I had applied to several schools, and while my dream school hadn't replied yet, I did receive two good offers. I was feeling happy about it all, with no time to think about Wen Qiao. I relished the peace and quiet, but it also showed that a man's patience is quite limited. With someone as beautiful as Zi Weiwei by his side for all those years, once my role as his white moonlight replacement was gone, how could he not seize the opportunity? Just when I thought everything might be coming to an end, Wen Qiao's mother arrived. I only learned about Wen Qiao's family background 6 months into our relationship. At that time, I was young and didn't pay much attention to the biking business circle. Besides, our family was far removed from that world. Naturally, I didn't know who Wen Qiao was. When I found out he was the heir to biking tech, I felt a wave of anxiety wash over me. I always assumed a family like his would prefer a marriage partner of equal social standing. Could someone like me, just an ordinary girl, really fit in? Wen Qiao comforted me. They don't care about those things. As long as two people are in love, everything else is secondary. I secretly inquired with friends about the Wen family in biking, and the response I got was that they were all remarkable individuals. There was no need to mention Wen Qiao's father. He had big ambitions from a young age, focusing on the internet sector, and successfully built and strengthened the company. His mother was also a well-known powerhouse, with a presence that rivaled her husband's. Before meeting his parents, I imagined many scenarios where I'd be met with disdain or dismissal. But when we finally met, I found that they were both consciously toning down their assertiveness, trying hard to appear friendlier. It was as if they were afraid of scaring me off. Over the years, I hadn't communicated much with them. After all, they were busy, but every time we met, it was quite pleasant. From our first meeting to the engagement, everything went smoothly, with none of the obstacles typically portrayed in dramas about marrying into wealth. Wen Qiao's mother's visit was truly unexpected. Knowing Wen Qiao as I did, I figured if we ended our relationship, he would handle any issues with his family himself. It shouldn't reach me. This usually refined and strong-willed woman now appeared haggard, her face etched with worrying. She told me that Wen Qiao hadn't been in good spirits in recent months, and had made significant mistakes at work. Wen Qiao is in the hospital now, and he wishes to see you. As she recounted this, I learned that Wen Qiao had experienced severe depression after Meng Yinan's death, and had once required hospitalization for treatment. No wonder I had never faced any difficulties from his family. They were just afraid that Wen Qiao's old illness would relapse. I had truly benefited from Meng Yinan's absence. Ua. Auntie, please, can you go see Wen Xiao? She spoke to me in a pleading tone, and it was the first time I saw her so vulnerable. A mother was willing to lower herself so much for her son. Auntie, there's really no need for us to meet. As the saying goes, a prolonged pain is worse than a brief one. Let's leave it at that. Wen Xiao will get better in time. I rejected her firmly. Just think of it as me asking you to understand a mother's heart. I really can't bear to see him like this. Suddenly, I felt very sad. For myself. Auntie, if my mother were still alive, she wouldn't allow anyone to let her daughter suffer. Please, Auntie, also consider my mother's feelings. With your family's resources, it would be better to find him the best doctor than to seek me out, since he was able to move on from Meng Yinan's death. He can certainly overcome this too. After all, I'm still alive, aren't I? On Christmas Day, I went out with my roommates to have some fun. Everyone said we should seize the last moments of our youth and celebrate. Next year, we'd be working as corporate drones by the time we returned to school. It was nearly 1 in the morning. Wen Xiao was waiting outside my dorm, holding a huge bouquet. They weren't roses. They were my favorite, the Swedish Queen Rose. It was impressive that he found such beautiful flowers in this season. But then again, with his financial means, it made sense. Nearby, a few people were whispering, saying he had been waiting there for several hours. When he caught sight of me, a look of tension crossed Wen Qiao's face. As I approached, I noticed his face and ears were bright red from the cold. In the frigid temperatures of biking, he must have been freezing. His voice he spoke, and a sense of grievance showed on his features. Wen Qiao! Just go home, I interrupted him. Can we make up? I love you. I've deleted all our messages. I've closed that account. I love you, not her. Can we start over? I looked at Wen Xiao like I was examining a stranger. What made him think that closing an account could erase everything that had happened? He was a computer expert himself. Trying to pull a fast one on a humanities student like me was way too easy. Besides, who could truly delete memories? I felt very calm, with no inner turmoil at all. There wasn't a hint of emotion. Wen Qiao, looking at my face, can you tell me? Can you really forget Meng Yinan? When you look at me, you'll always be thinking of her, even imagining how she'd grow up and how she would look as she aged. Wen Qiao, stop deceiving yourself. Whether Wen Qiao can forget Meng Yinan, I don't know. But I can certainly leave him behind. When I received the offer from my dream school, I completely relaxed. I finished my thesis ahead of schedule, just waiting for my defense and graduation. With my bags packed, I began my solo travels. I didn't even go home for the new year. After all, that happy family of 3 had long since left me with no place. Because of my breakup with Wen Xiao, my dad was furious. He cut off my allowance, but I didn't care. He still had my shares in his company, the ones my mom had left me. Of course, I wouldn't let anyone else benefit from them. I deserved every bit of the dividends, not losing a single cent. It felt like I had suddenly been set free, roaming across my homeland, from north to south, enjoying life to the fullest. They say traveling can purify the soul, and that's absolutely true. Along the way, I met many friends. Some were escaping from work, family, and relationship troubles, while others simply wanted to appreciate the beauty of nature. In short, everyone was enjoying the joys of the journey. Ji Shu, a painter I met during my travels, was 2 years younger than me. Coincidentally, he was also going to study in the UK. Literature and art have always been intertwined. So during our conversations, we discovered we had many shared interests. Sometimes we'd debate until our faces turned red, but then we'd lock eyes and burst into laughter. To people who were aimlessly wandering, ended up becoming companions on this journey. By the time we returned to biking, we had become close friends lamenting how we had met too late. I suspected Wen Xiao had arranged for someone to keep an eye on me. How else would he know the moment I came back? Once we arrived in Biking, I first returned to school, then invited Jishu out for dinner. He mentioned wanting to explore biking a bit, and I decided to play the gracious host. After dinner, he walked me back to school. As we reached the base of my dormitory, I saw Wen Xiao waiting for me again. I couldn't pretend not to recognize him. He approached me immediately. Yue, it's been a while. Wen Xiao called my name in that gentle tone of his, full of affection, but I didn't want to engage. Jishu noticed the awkwardness between us and spoke up. Yue, yeah, who is this? Wen Xiao seemed to just notice there was someone else beside me. His expression darkened suddenly, his tone questioning. Yue, who is he? I didn't answer his question. I told Jishu to head back first. This was between Wen Xiao and me, and I couldn't drag him into this. Wen Xiao, I've told you, we're not together anymore. Please don't come looking for me again. Yue, can't you give me another chance? No! As long as I still have this face, we'll never have a chance. And I have no intention of getting plastic surgery. After all those years we've spent together, can you really just let it go? His emotions were getting a bit heated. His voice rose as he spoke. Wen Xiao, are you joking? After all these years, I've only ever been a substitute. If Meng were still alive, I'd be nothing in your eyes. After throwing that back at him, I walked away without looking back. My good mood was completely ruined. What a downer! I felt like I was at odds with biking. Just when I got rid of one person, another appeared. Su Yue, I heard you're going abroad. I hope you don't come back after you leave. Zi Weiwei sat across from me, looking smug. Miss Z, whether I come back or not is none of your concern. I couldn't help but laugh in anger. Do you all think I'm an easy target? Wen Xiao is troubled because of you. As long as you don't come back, he'll eventually fall for me. I looked at her as if she were insane. Graduating from an Ivy League school doesn't mean you have no brains. How can you say something like that? With a scoff. I stared at her face for a moment. Why don't you consider getting some plastic surgery? If you look more like her, maybe Wen Xiao will pay you more attention. Regardless of how agitated Zi Weiwei became, I simply walked away. She was right about one thing, though. After I left, I probably wouldn't consider coming back. Not because I couldn't let go of Wen Xiao or was afraid to see him, but purely because I didn't want to stir up trouble. Wen Xiao was a possessive person. He lost Meng Yinan when he was 18 and hadn't dated anyone for 6 years. But once he met me, all in the name of love, he kept me trapped for 5 years. He wouldn't let me go easily. In biking, within his sphere of influence, right under his nose, I could never be truly free. But then again, why should I tell Zi Weiwei any of this? Wen Xiao frustrates me, and Zi Weiwei isn't much better. When I left biking, Zhang Yao came to see me off at the airport. I had actually gotten along well with her before. We had become good friends. But after everything that happened, we both knew that our friendship could never return to what it was. At the farewell, Zhang Yao hesitated, unsure of what to say. Finally, she asked me, Yue, are you going to regret this? Wen Xiao must truly love you. He treats you so well. Yeah, I won't regret it. When it comes to feelings, you'll understand once you experience it yourself. True love can never tolerate being someone else's substitute. Perhaps I'll never meet someone as exceptional as Wen Xiao again, or someone who treats me the way he did, but I'm certain I can find someone who loves Su Yue. He may not have an illustrious family background, and he won't be a perfect partner, but he'll love only Su Yue. But even if I never find that person, it's alright. I'm still Su Yue. In the second year after coming to the UK, I heard that when Xiao had gotten married, his father passed away, unexpectedly due to illness, and the shareholders took advantage of the situation. The Wen family faced technological issues at Biking Tech again. The family was on shaky ground. With no other choice, he chose to enter a marriage alliance. His new partner was also from a wealthy family in the circle, able to provide substantial support. His feelings for Meng Yinan had ended there. What does it matter if he was devoted? When it comes to interests, it's easy to let go. If I had truly married him back then, who knows, I might have had to step aside for someone else. After all, the Su family couldn't offer him significant funds. I pushed open the window, and it was a rare sunny day. The sunlight poured onto my desk, warming my heart as well. Su Yue? I looked down at the sound. Jishu was standing downstairs, holding a potted plant. He said the Swedish queen roses were too delicate. Fresh-cut flowers wilt in a day, so I brought you a potted plant instead. At least it'll last a few more days. 10 years later, after Jishu and I got married, we returned to China. His family was in the south, and I didn't want to go back to biking. So we moved to the city where his family lived. He continued to paint his art, while I taught at a university. Our daughter was now in kindergarten. Jishu had a flexible schedule, so he'd drop me off at school in the morning, then take our daughter. After saying goodbye to the two of them, I turned and entered the school gates. That's when I saw Wen Xiao. Su Yue, it's been a while. Mr. Wen. I returned his polite smile. Wen Xiao mentioned he was here to discuss a collaboration with our school. I wished him good luck with the partnership, then walked away. This campus only had humanities and social sciences, while the Wen family had always been focused on tech development. But it didn't matter. Tomorrow was Saturday, and my family of 3 was heading to the amusement park. The end.